Actually, I think I need to go out to LinkedIn so that I can start the darn event.
Okay. And it says we're live 23 seconds in, yeah.
Yeah, that's what it said. I just wasn't sure if it was yes, it is. Darn. So it looks like we are live. So sorry for the confusion here, John. Anyway, my name is John Gillespie. Thank you for joining us today. This is with me here is John Davis, a friend of mine for a number of years. Today, we're going to talk about unrealized value, right? The gap between where we are today, current value, and what our customers or the marketplace might be looking for, right? The only way to get or to obtain that unrealized value is through innovation, right? Innovation's hard, right? Have you worked with companies that try to innovate and are not so successful, or they try to figure it out into a cookbook package, John?
I think they're generally afraid to innovate. I think they're so accustomed to just working from, somewhere things are packaged up saying, here's what we need and why we need it, go build it. There's not much creative thinking or creative license for those in the teams and or the people that are leading those teams. So I think they see it as a foregone conclusion, which is a theme from last week. But
Yes.
there's one group that was a manufacturing group, and they had an innovation lab, a garage. So they had like electrical, mechanical, a usability engineer, software engineers. They had a collection of engineers, and they produced machines that get installed on the production line for GM, for example, is one of their customers. And these are massive multi-million-dollar machines that do plastic welding. Really great people. They wanted to use a collaborative approach where they were figuring out how to bring innovation. So I won't get into the details here, but I remember the conversation was, well, how did you start your company 32, 33 years ago? And it was, well, we were on the production line floor and we saw the needs. And from that, innovation was born versus, we're in a garage that's in an innovation lab and we're separate from our own production floor, let alone our customers. So they had conversations about maybe we need to get back to where innovation is born, the necessity, right? Of what are people doing that we could help them innovate on. But you can't do that if you don't observe it or collaborate with people, which are your actual customers.
Right. So in the Kanban world, they talk about walking the Gemba, right? Even if you're a manager, get out there with the work's getting done.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's too much of a disconnect. Hard to do innovation.
Yeah.
And even if you are able to innovate successfully, there's this, Clayton Christensen has a series of books out like The Innovator Solution, The Innovator's Dilemma, where he talks about some successful companies who actually do what they call sustaining innovation. They're constantly adding new capabilities to their products, which may end up with like a bloated Microsoft, operating system. Force has gone from a relatively small application to something that has got CRM and all kinds of other things built into it. So they're potentially overserving their marketplace, right? They're constantly getting better and better. Maybe somebody asked for it, right? Just like the old Coke Classic thing, where there was a few voices that said, that the new Coke would be a great thing. And guess what? They weren't close enough to the marketplace. They had to roll back then. It was a pretty embarrassing thing, right? Well, the sustaining innovation potentially creates a gap between the customer's need, the problems that customers actually are solved, and versus what you're offering, right? If there's no alternative in the market, they just keep paying for what you're selling, right? But when you finally get an entrepreneur that says, "Hey, look, I can develop a cool app that solves these people's problems at a tenth of the cost of what this established player is going to provide." Right. And that's what Clayton Christensen talked about as disruptive innovation. Right. So basically, we have to actually be careful about where we're going with the product. And that's one of the reasons why it's actually sad that many product teams, including product owners, don't understand how what they're doing with their product aligns with their company vision, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So probably a lot of listeners or people viewing this will relate to this. And it may be off topic for us, but I think innovation, constantly innovating makes sense. But, there's this sort of banner of modernization. We've got to do a full rewrite of a module or a system in the name of the latest technology stack or, cost efficiency for virtualization, whatever is driving it. It's CIO, CTO driven usually and multi-million dollar thing. But what you find is everybody just goes and rebuilds the as is version on the new stack instead of innovating. What are the few features that people actually need? What are the things that people are most frustrated by or burdened by? Have you ever walked in their shoes? Maybe you wouldn't rebuild it the same way. So I feel like that innovation, that's a great example. Like it's hard to say, well, how do you innovate something new? Well, how do you innovate something existing? That should be more within reach to grasp the concepts. But people just do this, they bulldoze, they just go and they rebuild the same thing twice. I don't know that that's good enough, for an organization. If I'm a part of that doesn't put wind in my sails.
It sure doesn't, but I can't count how many times I've heard the argument that we don't need to do any analysis. We just need to rebuild what we have, right?
Yeah,
Haven't been in the industry for 30 plus years, and I've
yeah.
seen the migrations from green screen mainframes to client server, and then sometimes even the same application that went from Kix DB2 to Power Builder, Sybase on client server, and then to web app. Really trying to carry the same functionality from architecture to architecture without doing any thought into, who's using the product, how often do they use these features, how
So,
many.
so maybe you could help define, John. I didn't mean to jump
Yeah.
in there, but you're inspiring this. Like, what is unrealized value versus the thing that everybody's familiar with or throws around in business is opportunity cost. So if you're going to rewrite the whole system for the next year for multiple millions of dollars with hundreds of people, that comes as an opportunity cost, especially if you knew that you only needed half the stuff.
Right.
So 50% of that was a waste of time and money. But what's unrealized value? Like it sounds like there's a potential there that we want to try to help people maybe understand or visualize.
So that's a good point, John, in that
Yeah.
really, in order to understand the opportunity cost and what the potential ROI on pursuing it is, we need to understand what the unrealized value potentially could be, right? So,
Yeah.
how would I make the decision? If it made sense to develop, to invest another $1 million in porting this application, if I didn't understand what the unrealized value for the marketplace might be,
So you
right?
got some kind of business case to
Right.
back it up. It's not just an idea or a concept that you actually had fleshed out an analysis of some kind.
Right. So basically, if I were looking to port an application, that a siloed application and keep it in my own personal data center, and the world now has moved to cloud and SaaS operating systems,
Mhm.
why would I spend the money to go there? And then 6 months later realize I have to take the next step too, right?
Yeah.
So if I understand what the unrealized value is, and related to the company vision and such, it'll help me make the right investments.
So it drives us to it's the thing we should be doing,
We
right?
should
At some
be.
level. We
Right.
should.
We should be. I haven't had the opportunity to work with lots of clients that actually are looking in that direction.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
in that, my experience is somebody has made the decision that they want to do that. They want to make this investment. And it is just like IT, go do it, right? And this has been in some of the largest insurance companies, some of the largest banks, basically, and I've worked in a number of them over the last 25 years or so. The decisions are often made at the CIO, lead business user, and they say that's our stakeholder. Do what that he or she wants, and that person may have never utilized, put their hands on a keyboard executing that type of application. They hear from their workers that, yeah, we want this to be upgraded, but if I haven't used it, do I really know what's important and what's it have to be, or do I just tell people lift and load, port it all?
Yeah, and, so our crossroads there, where you and I came to know each other, we were at the oldest, largest financial institution in the U.S. We'll leave it at that, and they're a bank, and there was a strategic project for CRM implementation that had the full attention of the CEO, and it was an implementation gone bad, so they had to re-implement it, and they put an army of stakeholders and an army of people in place to say this is the most important thing. We have to get this right, and they had good reason for that. But I found the gap of the slide decks that the head product owner, they were using Scrum at scale there at some level, multiple Scrum teams, but the head product owner had a wonderful slide deck. And I mean that not like tongue in cheek or cynical, but a great slide deck that actually decomposed sort of strategic objectives into key deliverables that had clear business measures, business outcomes tied to those. He's a great guy. I'm not sure where they are now because this was fairly recent as of end of year, calendar year. But the idea was putting in his ear, if you could just transform what you actually have in your literal product backlog to coincide with the coherence that's in your slide deck, because the product backlog was a mess. Everybody was working on everything all the time and nothing's getting released, and there was no real tangible progress. So the unrealized value was, we need to pursue these most important things first. If we don't, we should be. So whose fault is that, right? It was, well, the head product owner had the coherent structure of what it is we should be doing and didn't implement it in the product backlog. So I would say it would fall with him for not having made it visible to the teams. The concern they had, if I can go on a little tear, was, yeah, but these teams and that team, and then we don't have a product owner on that module yet, and we're waiting for a resource there. And in the corporate world, we try to find these reasons. It's like, product owner, your job is so easy if you just make it visible in your backlog what needs to be done. It then highlights, if they're not doing it, the business problem we need to solve, right?
Right.
But if you're making excuses for them and not making it visible, then ultimately it's on you. So
Absolutely.
I feel like, those teams could realign themselves if they knew what they were realigning themselves to. And that's kind of like the unrealized value is the thing at stake. And they showed that every week to the stakeholders, like, this is what we're working on, but there was no real indication of anything going out the door anytime soon to solve materially any of those business problems.
And I'd be interested, John, did the stakeholders ever ask why when they got the presentation? Hey, these are the great things we're working on. Did anyone ever ask why?
Well, I think they were so accustomed to, it's all got to be done by the deadline. Trust us.
Yeah.
And everything was getting touched. Everything was being worked on over time. And the reasons we couldn't release things is because, from the technical people watching this or listening, things get balled up. The source code gets tangled up. The configurations get applied on top of each other, and you don't release them. So now everything is kind of waiting until it's all done.
Right.
So it's a mess that could be teased apart at any moment. It's never too late to orient yourself to the true value.
Right. And we've talked a little bit about, hey, company vision is important because that's what the product owner has to align to. Then the product owner needs to have a product goal and communicate it to the team. And this is the team's responsibility to be asking why, right? If they don't have a clear understanding of the product goal, product vision, they need to ask why. I mean, the team is responsible for helping to collaborating on a sprint goal, right? So basically, when I'm trying to take the things out of the product backlog to cobble together a sprint goal, what's the basic question is why? What are we going to do this sprint to get us closer to achieving the product goal? If we're not asking those questions, I don't know that we're ever going to get closer to that North Star that should have been published.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Right. So vision, and product goal, is important. Strategic intents it gets mentioned in Melissa Perry's book on the product operating model. It's the thing that executives maybe kind of flow down to a product owner. The what are the business challenges that are standing in the way of us achieving this long term company vision? So then the product goal should be aimed at chipping away at that, right?
Yeah.
So, and the strategy of that should always be the hypothesis of, well, we believe if we deliver this set of features and functionalities, we're going to get closer to the goal. And if we're not doing that, everyone on the team should be raising their hand, and the stakeholders should be too. It was like, if I care about what's being developed, if I care about how you're investing our funds to deliver something in the future, take an active role. I mean, there's a reason why the Scrum Guide was changed a number of years ago, so that it wasn't a sprint demo and it was a sprint retrospective, because it can't be a passive thing that just is a group hug and applauding the developers at the end of the sprint about all the great things they did. It needs to be something where we're critically looking at
Yeah.
how do we progress to the goal, right?
Is this useful? Does it need, is it missing anything? Does it need any revision before we release it? Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, some of the measures that when you're trying to look at unrealized value, the common ones are market share and trends,
Okay.
market growth and decline, alignment of customer top priorities and characteristics, which may or may not be included if we don't have, if we're not close enough to where the work is being consumed, and then there needs to, should be able to answer the question: are further investments in this product worth pursuing these opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, some leading measures. If we were talking to our customers about and the marketplace about what we're doing, we should be actively thinking about, hey, what type of leads are being generated, right? So if people aren't actually calling us, at least to find out, hey, when's that going to come to market? One, either they don't know that it might be valuable, or they don't need it. Either both of those things are bad if I'm investing money in producing this, right? So along with leads generated, are people requesting trials or demonstrations? Uh, with respect to existing products that we're looking to enhance, basically, what's our percentage of new versus existing customers? Some of the best product companies in their quarterly calls for publicly traded companies, they talk about their retention ratio, right? So basically, over 10 years, if 90% of my people are constantly renewing the product, we're doing something right? So on the other hand, if we have a lot of defections, that should be an indicator that we're doing something wrong and we need to kind of change, where we're going with it, right?
Yeah. And you always got to put that in context, right? If you're the only game in town and take it or leave it, this is our offering for service and products, and you have low attrition. Um, well, maybe that makes sense, but I don't know that that's a good thing. But I love the way you talked about it. Most product companies, it's easy for people to just switch products. CTOs are doing that all the time with products in their shops. I switch products all the time just because I get frustrated with a particular feature.
Exactly. And, basically, although there may be no other game in town, given time, somebody's going to recognize that there's a lot of frustration here, and
Yeah.
someone's going to solve it, and you're going to lose that, those opportunities, right?
Yeah.
So some things that maybe take a little bit more effort, that I don't see happening a lot in the marketplace, and maybe just I haven't had access to those people in the companies, but the competitors' strength, weakness, and opportunities, basically the SWOT analysis. Those things, that can be relatively easy when I'm talking about it with respect to my team and the skills on my team. But when I'm trying to really consider what the competitors are bringing and what type of intelligence do we have on the marketplace, the best way to get that is to talk to our customers, and not just the ones that have signed up, but if we find defectors, or if we find
Yeah.
people that chose not to buy with us, it makes a lot of sense to ask a few extra questions to understand why they made that decision.
So I'm usually the guy that's internally facing on how to build product and get it to market, and there's an external component with product management that's beyond my experience, my skills. And you try to find people in the organization that complement you. So I've always worked with those people that understand that the way you're talking makes sense to me, but I haven't done it. But I would say also just think of most industries you've been in, John. I mean, I could think of 3 or 4 industries. And that usually means, people, there's a revolving door. People go from company to company to company in the same industry. So a lot of times we don't even value our own internal talent,
Right.
to find out what, with non-competes and intellectual property, we can't just share old documents, but there is an awareness of what customers have said and what we're doing better, what we could do better, what our competitors are doing better. Like how do you get a conversation going internally is just as rare as talking to your actual customers, I find.
Yeah, it's hard, and maybe unless you have specific events in your company where you're trying to pull people together to understand more about your product market fit, right? So
Yeah.
what are we doing? What are we, kind of a retrospective? What are we doing well? What are we not doing? And what feedback are we getting? Especially like you said, if you have new people to the company, encourage them to share their experience and what they see maybe as a gap. Uh, yeah, in some of the legacy companies, like the large insurance companies and banks, there's a tendency to not value the newcomers' opinions very much. In fact, I've been in meetings where a person kind of talked somebody down, saying, we've been doing this successfully, and no exaggeration, more than 100 years.
Right.
Why should we take this input and change the way we're doing this right now? Right. That's a very disheartening comment, right? We're going to make sure that nobody ever speaks up in the future, right?
Well, that's part of their culture, right? Because that person hasn't been there for 100 years, but that's what they heard from their predecessors and so on. But you get that same kind of hubris with startups that they just know everything. They think they know everything about exactly what needs to be done. And they've got a lot riding on that. Usually it's their own personal debt or wealth that they put into their idea. And when people are that close-minded, it always just troubles you to watch that without much influence over it. Just get
Right.
people to open up and ask, be empirical.
So I think everyone, whether they're working in a legacy type of company or a startup, should take the time to read Eric Rice's book on the lean startup, right? Uh,
Dude,
yeah,
we didn't reherse this, but I always tear my covers off.
yeah,
The lean startup, I don't know, there. It's
yeah,
backwards.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, mine. I've got a really old copy. It's blue and white, not the yellow, but the same
Yeah,
same thing. Yeah,
yeah.
I always, I've read it, covered it. It's an easy read, but I've read it a number of times, partially because, I had a little bit, I founded a number of companies, sold one to a publicly traded firm,
Mhm.
and had another company of mine that had VC backing. And let me tell you, the VC folks were cutthroat. And if I ever lost their money, luckily I didn't, they would have never invested, given me for another idea to
Oh,
go do something different. And the fact that he got 3 shots, 3 bites at the apple, power to him that he didn't give up and he figured a new way of coming at it. I mean, basically, his do enough work to learn something and pivot,
yeah.
is an awesome way. And basically the whole EBM thing, come up with hypotheses, run experiments, get feedback, and understand where you're going. Right? Think of it
Yeah.
as a sailboat navigating by the stars. You're going to tick and tack based on the wind, but you kind of know that the general direction that you should be going. Right?
And by definition, it's an adventure, and you don't have all the answers.
But I need to act like I do, otherwise management won't be happy with me. But
Right.
I say that tongue in cheek, not trying to minimize the difficulty of delivering a tough message to your leadership. Right, that it's that's never a fun position to be in. Another book that basically extreme ownership, for people that are in those difficult positions, to get a little bit of maybe reinforcement or ideas on how to reposition an argument and not just give up. Because I know in my past, more than once, I
Yeah.
basically have felt like, hey, I've tried. I don't know where to go other than leave, and I'm going to go get a job somewhere else because I tried and it's not being received well. Not everyone has those options, right? So to come up with an approach where you say, okay, look, I understand why they turned me down or they didn't buy into it. Can I put myself in their shoes and look for an argument that might resonate with them? Like, what do they get out of it if we do better
Yeah.
than what they assumed, right?
I feel like Jocko and Leif, I forget the principle, but I think it's walking up and down the line,
Yeah.
and then with Reese's book, it's about dealing in reality. So I think with Jocko and Leif, it's, you got to engage your stakeholders. It takes a bit of courage to actually get them to deal in reality and see current truth. You have to manage up, if you will, is the typical corporate way of saying that. But then this book, it's the same thing. It's these short experiments prove out some things that we can constantly spot, like current reality and next ambition as a cycle, and that pivot and persevere. But if you have stakeholders that are funding it that have, I just want a return in 3 years, I don't care about the details. Well, if you're not dealing in reality at that level, you're doomed at some level.
Right.
You might
And
survive as the executive in residence or the founder, but
right. And I find that the executives that tell me get out of here and I just want to see it when they're done, they're not investing their own money, right?
yeah,
Basically when I'm working for for a small company where they're investing their own money, by
yeah,
all means, they are in every single sprint review, giving me lots of feedback and telling me exactly what they would like to see as the next sprint goal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. So having an engaged set of users makes your life a lot easier, And if you don't have an engaged set of stakeholders, uh, really, do yourself a favor, spend time, get out there and walk the halls, find people that can be your champion and help you with getting the information that you need. Right. If I don't understand what my customer satisfaction gap may be, why
Mhm.
am I doing this project?
I have another story that might fit, but I think we only have about 3 minutes, and you're going to bring us home. But do you want me to try to squeeze something in, or should we use that for next
Yeah.
week as an
Yeah,
opener?
yeah, so the story would be great. Yeah.
So let me try it. So there was a startup that had been around, and they're the company that had the best mission that I'm aware of in a long, long time. Like, they were trying to get funding for people who were dealing with critical care issues where they didn't have money to get certain cancer treatments or certain transplantation or whatever it was they needed. They didn't have the money. And it was a great mission because it wasn't a predatory based company like, oh, we'll get you money, for you to have high debt and, high interest rate and go bankrupt. They literally found money and were getting it to them as a pipeline. That was their core business. And for every 6 to 8 months, they would do an integration. It would take them that long, and they would bring on about a $600,000 new pipeline of money that they could give away to people that needed it. Real patients and real doctors' offices that served their real patients. So those offices would look up on their system what kind of money they could get for people who needed that care right then and there. So it was great, but the more we could bring on, so the CEO was kind of like, can we get sort of twice the value in half the time proposition? Could we get this down to like 3 or 4 months to onboard this? And could we do it in an efficient way that we could do 2 to 3 times even more integrations than we're doing right now with the current people? So it was like that was a mission onto the company mission. How do we solve that problem? But that's $600,000, that they could project for every integration they do. There's a huge amount of money, and they were looking at like every month or every quarter, how much money did we get to people? So like you talked about market share, you talked about share price and that sort of thing. But that's a different kind of monetary view of value creation in the world. Like that money didn't exist, and patients live or die by that.
That sounds great. And you keyed in on one thing.
Here's the hit. Do you want the hitch, or do you want to go ahead, finish your thought before I give you the hitch?
Well, no, go ahead, because basically I thought that, I'm sorry for interrupting. Go ahead, John.
No, you're good. So basically, they were doing iterative incremental development, and they were getting their cards to the done column, and that meant for them, we could release it, we could release this, we could release this. And then they had these short releases defined. Release 1, we have all these things releasable. Release 2, we have all these things releasable. Release 3, look how focused we are on release 3, and we have all these things releasable. Good flow. And they wouldn't release anything. Like, and I mean, like, it's a huge mission that the company's on, and the mission to solve that problem, for those teams to go on. That's the perfect mission, perfect operation. And then there's something big at stake, and it's like, we're just not releasing. And it was in front of the stakeholders all the time. They're like, we're just accumulating releasable stuff. I don't know.
So no, well, other than letting them know that they're getting no value. And you said something that really, really kind of, stuck with me a bit. Twice the value in half the time, right? Back in the early days of Scrum, one of the influential Scrum people wrote a book, and he talked about it, unfortunately, as twice the work in half the time, right? So I used to get customers saying, all the time beating us up because we weren't getting all this work done. But if you actually talk about it in terms of value, then that's a different equation, right? But anyway, we're going past our time box for today. Thank you for the conversation, John. So next week we'll pick up a little bit with our time to market, or EVA and value area and EBM value area, and talk about how that is important. And that leads in, the following week, we'll talk a little bit about ability to innovate. Anyone watching, please do, if you have comments, questions that you'd like to see us answer in an upcoming talk, please throw them in the comments section. We'd love to hear from you.
That'd be great.
Thanks a lot, John.
For the invite, John. Good seeing you again.
Likewise.